Crash on the frozen world. The emergency alarms screamed inside the small spacecraft. Red lights flashed wildly as Lieutenant Daniel Cross gripped the controls. His fingers were stiff, his body shaking. The ship was spinning out of control, falling fast toward the icy planet below. "Come on, hold together," he muttered, trying to stabilize the ship. But it was no use. The left wing was gone, torn apart by the asteroid field he had just escaped. Smoke filled the cockpit, and sparks flew from the control panels. The planet grew larger on the screen. White, endless ice, covered in deadly blizzards. Impact was seconds away. Daniel braced himself. He had been through rough landings before, but this was different. He was alone, deep in uncharted space. No backup. No rescue team coming. The ship hit the ground hard. Metal screamed as it skidded across the ice. The force threw Daniel against his seat. His helmet slammed against the side, and stars exploded in his vision. The ship crashed through a frozen ridge, breaking it apart before finally coming to a stop. Silence. Daniel's ears rang. His vision blurred. Was he still alive? He groaned, trying to move. Every part of his body ached. He reached up and pressed a button on his suit, his oxygen supply. The numbers flashed on his visor. 37% remaining. Not good. Daniel unbuckled his seatbelt and tried to stand, but his legs gave out. He collapsed onto the freezing metal floor, breathing heavily. "Okay," he whispered. "You're alive. That's a start." The ship was broken. Smoke rose from the damaged consoles. The windshield was cracked, but outside, all he could see was white, a frozen wasteland. Daniel pressed a button on his wrist communicator. "Mayday, Mayday. This is Lieutenant Daniel Cross. My ship has crashed. I repeat, my ship has crashed. If anyone can hear this, I need immediate rescue." Static. No response. Daniel swallowed. No one was coming. Survival. He had to move. His suit was insulated, but the cold was already creeping in. If he stayed inside the wreckage, he would freeze to death. He grabbed an emergency thermal pack and strapped it to his back. It would keep him warm, for a while. He also took a plasma cutter from the toolkit. He had no idea what was out there, but he wasn't going to take chances. Pushing against the door, he forced it open. A blast of icy wind hit him immediately, cutting through his suit like knives. Daniel stepped outside. The planet was dead silent. No signs of life. No trees. No water. Just endless ice and snow, stretching in every direction. The wind howled. The temperature display on his suit flashed warnings. -60 degrees Celsius. "Great," he muttered. He had to find shelter. He looked around. In the distance, he spotted what looked like a cave at the base of a massive ice mountain. It was far, but it was his only chance. Daniel started walking. The blizzard and the shadow. The snow was deep, and every step felt like walking through thick mud. His breathing became heavy. His legs ached. But he pushed forward. The wind picked up. The blizzard became stronger. Soon, he could barely see his own hands. His oxygen dropped to 22%. "Come on, just a little more," he whispered, trying to keep himself moving. Then, a sound. A low, distant growl. Daniel froze. It didn't sound like the wind. It sounded alive. Slowly, he turned his head. Through the thick snow, he saw it, a shadow moving in the blizzard. It was big. Bigger than any animal he had ever seen. Its shape was hard to define, but it moved like a predator, slow and careful. Daniel's heart pounded. He gripped the plasma cutter in his hand, but he knew it was useless. If this thing attacked, he wouldn't stand a chance. The shadow stopped. For a moment, the only sound was the wind. Then it disappeared. Daniel didn't wait to find out what it was. He turned and ran. His legs burned. His breath came in short gasps. The cave was still far, but he had to reach it. The wind roared around him. His vision blurred. His oxygen warning beeped again. Then, his foot slipped on the ice. He fell hard. His head hit the ground. His helmet cracked. Darkness. The stranger in the ice. Daniel was barely conscious. His mind was slipping. His body was numb. Through half-closed eyes, he saw something approaching. A figure. Not the beast. Something else. It moved on two legs. Its form was tall, humanoid, but not human. Daniel couldn't move. He tried to lift his arm, but it was too heavy. His breath came in short gasps. The figure knelt beside him. Golden eyes stared down at him, glowing in the dim snowlight. Daniel's vision darkened. The last thing he felt was strong arms lifting him from the ice. Then, blackness. The alien woman. A dull ache spread through Daniel's body, a slow, throbbing pain that came from everywhere at once. His head felt heavy. His fingers were stiff. His breath was slow and shallow, yet warm. That wasn't right. He had been lying in the snow, his oxygen running out, the icy death of the planet creeping into his bones. But now, he was alive. His eyelids flickered open. At first, everything was blurry, just a swirl of soft blue light and dark shadows. He blinked, and the world sharpened. He was inside a cave, but not like any natural cave he had seen before. The walls were smooth, almost glass-like, glowing faintly with a soft, eerie blue light. Ice crystals hung from the ceiling, reflecting the glow like tiny frozen stars. The air was thick and humid, completely unlike the frozen wasteland outside. He wasn't cold. In fact, his body felt comfortable. Daniel tried to sit up. A sharp pain shot through his ribs, making him wince. That's when he realized his wounds were bandaged. His arm, where his suit had been torn, was wrapped in something soft but firm. His chest had been patched up too. Someone had saved him. Slowly, carefully, he turned his head. And then, he saw her. The mysterious rescuer. She was sitting on a raised platform of ice, cross-legged, watching him with an intense, unreadable expression. She was tall, taller than any human woman he had ever seen. Her body was lean but powerful, her arms toned like a warrior's. Her skin was deep blue, smooth and slightly reflective, like polished stone. Her face was fierce and sharp, yet strangely beautiful. Golden eyes studied him like a hunter watching prey. Her hair, long, dark, and braided, was pulled over one shoulder, and her ears were pointed, slightly curved backward. But it was her armor that stood out the most. She wasn't just some random alien survivor. She wore black and silver plating over her chest and shoulders, marked with strange tribal symbols. A curved blade rested on her hip, and a long spear lay within arm's reach. She was a warrior, and Daniel had no idea if she was friend or enemy. A tense first meeting. Daniel tried to speak, but his throat was dry. He coughed, and immediately the alien woman's posture stiffened. She moved fast, too fast, rising from her seat and standing over him before he even had time to react. Her golden eyes narrowed. Daniel raised his hands, palms up, a universal sign of peace. "Easy," he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't mean any harm." The alien woman tilted her head slightly, but she didn't respond. She understood him. He could feel it. But she didn't speak. Daniel swallowed hard. He needed to show her he wasn't a threat. Slowly, he gestured toward his chest, then to her. "You helped me." No reaction at first. Then, after a long pause, she gave a single, slow nod. Daniel let out a shaky breath. "Thank you." Still, she said nothing. Instead, she stepped closer, examining him like he was some kind of rare creature. Her eyes flicked over his suit, his hands, his face. Then suddenly, she reached out and touched his forehead. Daniel flinched. Her fingers were surprisingly warm, a contrast to her cold surroundings. Her touch was firm, but not aggressive. She seemed curious. Then she pulled away and said her first words. "You are different." Her voice was deep yet smooth, carrying an odd accent. Daniel blinked. She spoke his language. No, her lips didn't match the words. Some kind of translation tech. "I could say the same about you," he said, his voice still weak. The woman frowned slightly, as if trying to make sense of his words. Then she turned and walked away, retrieving a small bowl filled with a steaming liquid. She returned, and without a word, offered it to them. Daniel hesitated. What was in it? Was it safe? But then his stomach growled loudly, betraying him. He hadn't eaten in hours, maybe longer. With no better choice, he took the bowl. It was carved from some kind of smooth white bone. The liquid inside was thick, a deep purple color, with small bits of something floating in it. It smelled strange, like a mix of herbs and something metallic. The alien woman watched him expectantly. Daniel took a tiny sip. Warm, earthy, a little bitter, but not bad. When he didn't immediately choke or die, he took another sip, then another. The woman's lips curled slightly. Not quite a smile, but close. "You drink like a child," she said. Daniel let out a weak chuckle. "I'll take that as a compliment." She sat back down, watching him in silence. Then finally she spoke again. "My name is Sayeri." Daniel set the bowl down and met her golden eyes. "Daniel," he said. "Lieutenant Daniel Cross." Sayeri tilted her head. "You are not of this world." "No, I crash-landed here. My ship is broken. I have no way to contact my people." Sayeri was quiet for a moment. Then she simply said, "Then you are dead." Daniel's stomach tightened. She said it so casually, like it was a simple fact. "Not if I can find a way off this planet," he said firmly. Sayeri exhaled through her nose, something close to a laugh, but with no humor. "There is no way off," she said. "No ships come here. No signals leave. The storm never ends." Daniel's hands curled into fists. He refused to believe that. "There's always a way," he muttered. Sayeri studied him for a long time, then finally said, "You are stubborn. That is good." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Good?" Sayeri smirked. "If you wish to survive," she said, "then you must learn. You are weak now, but I can make you strong." Daniel's heart pounded. This was it, his only chance. He didn't know who Sayeri truly was. He didn't know if he could trust her, but one thing was clear. Without her, he wouldn't last long. He had to learn. He had to fight. Because no matter what it took, he was getting off this planet. The beasts of ice. Daniel sat near the glowing ice wall, staring at his hands. His fingers had stopped shaking, the warmth of Sayeri's strange cavern settling deep into his bones. He was alive, but for how long? Sayeri moved around the cave with quiet efficiency, checking supplies, sharpening her blade, and ignoring him entirely. She was a survivor, a warrior. Every movement was precise, like she had done this routine 1,000 times before. Daniel, on the other hand, felt useless. His ship was in ruins. His communicator was dead. No rescue was coming. And according to Sayeri, this world was a prison. The wind howled outside, a never-ending blizzard. The cave trembled as the storm battered its entrance. Daniel turned to Sayeri, clearing his throat. "How long have you been here?" She didn't answer at first. She just kept sharpening her blade. Then, without looking at him, she said, "Too long." Her voice was heavy with something unspoken. Daniel frowned. He had so many questions, but he didn't know how much she was willing to tell him. Instead, he changed the subject. "So, what's out there?" He nodded toward the cave entrance. Sayeri's golden eyes flicked toward him, then to the cave's opening. "This world is not empty," she said. "It is hunting you even now." Daniel's blood ran cold. Hunting. Before he could ask more, Sayeri stood. Come. She grabbed a thick cloak made of some unknown fur and tossed it to him. Daniel caught it clumsily. What? Where are we going? Sayeri slung her spear over her back. You wish to survive, yes. Daniel hesitated. Then he nodded. Then you must see, she said. See what waits in the storm. She turned and walked toward the cave's entrance, her form blending into the blue shadows. Daniel swallowed hard. Then he followed. The frozen wasteland. The wind hit him like a hammer. Daniel immediately regretted everything. The storm outside was relentless. The air was so cold it burned. Ice crystals whipped across his face, his suit barely protecting him. Sayeri moved through the snow like a ghost, unaffected by the storm. Daniel, meanwhile, stumbled with every step. Remind me why we're out here, he shouted over the wind. Sayeri didn't answer. Instead, she pointed toward a ridge of jagged ice in the distance. Daniel followed her gaze and froze. Tracks. Massive paw prints, half buried in the snow. Each one was nearly twice the size of his own foot. The claws had dug deep into the ice, leaving long, sharp grooves. Daniel's stomach tightened. That's big. Sayeri nodded. It hunts the weak. Daniel didn't like the way she said that. What is it? He asked. Sayeri crouched, running her fingers along the prints. Her golden eyes narrowed. Nixtra, she said. We call them the beasts of ice. Daniel looked at the tracks again. And how big are they exactly? Sayeri stood. Large enough to swallow you whole. Daniel let out a nervous laugh. Fantastic. She turned to him. If it finds you alone, it will kill you. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. And if it finds us together? Sayeri smirked. Then we kill it. Daniel was not reassured. The predator in the snow. A deep, bone-rattling growl echoed through the blizzard. Daniel's breath caught. It came from somewhere close. Sayeri immediately grabbed her spear, muscles tensing. It has caught our scent. Daniel felt every hair on his body stand on end. I vote we run. Sayeri glanced at him. Run, and you die. Daniel did not like that answer. Another growl. Closer this time. The snow shifted. Daniel turned his head just in time to see movement. A shadow in the blizzard, massive, shifting between the ice like a living nightmare. Then, the wind broke for just a second. And he saw it. A Nixtra. It was huge. Its body was covered in shimmering white fur, blending perfectly with the storm. Its 4 powerful legs ended in razor-sharp claws, thick enough to shred metal. Its long, wolf-like head was filled with serrated fangs, its eyes glowing with a pale blue light. It was staring right at them. Daniel's blood turned to ice. Sayeri didn't hesitate. She grabbed Daniel's arm and yanked him backward. Move, she hissed. The beast charged. Daniel barely had time to react before Sayeri pushed him aside. The Nixtra slammed into the snow where he had just stood, its claws tearing through the ice like paper. Sayeri spun, her spear flashing in the cold light. She lunged, aiming for the beast's throat. The Nixtra twisted at the last second, the spear grazing its shoulder instead. It let out an angry snarl, whipping around with unnatural speed. Sayeri dodged, rolling through the snow like a trained warrior. Daniel, meanwhile, was on his back, scrambling for his plasma cutter. Sayeri, he shouted. Any advice? Do not die, she snapped. Great, super helpful. The Nixtra lunged again. Sayeri met it head-on. Her spear struck true this time, plunging into the beast's side. It howled, staggering backward. But it wasn't dead. Daniel knew they had seconds before it recovered. His eyes darted around, then landed on a jagged formation of sharp ice spears sticking out of the ground nearby. An idea hit him. Sayeri, he shouted. Get it to chase you, toward the ice. She glanced at him, eyes narrowing, but she didn't argue. She whistled sharply, grabbing the beast's attention. Then she turned and ran toward the spikes of ice. The Nyxtra roared and charged after her. At the last second, Sayeri jumped aside. The beast couldn't stop in time. It slammed into the ice, impaling itself on the jagged spears. The Nyxtra let out a final, painful snarl before falling still. Silence. Daniel let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Sayeri stood over the dead creature, spear still in hand. Then, slowly, she turned to him. "You are smarter than you look, human." Daniel let out a tired chuckle. "I get that a lot." Sayeri smirked. Then she stepped forward and pulled her spear free from the corpse. "This is only the beginning," she said. Daniel swallowed hard. Somehow, he knew she was right. The hidden truth. Daniel sat near the cave's entrance, staring at the dead Nyxtra outside. The wind howled around its massive form, its fur frozen stiff, its pale blue eyes now lifeless. It should have been a victory, but instead, it only reminded him of one simple fact. This planet wanted him dead, and if it weren't for Sayeri, it would have succeeded. The alien woman sat on the other side of the cave, her golden eyes focused on the freshly skinned hide she had pulled from the beast. Her movements were quick, practiced. She had done this many times before. Daniel, on the other hand, felt completely out of place. He had trained as a soldier. He had survived hostile planets before. But this was different. He pulled his knees up, resting his arms on them. "So," he said, breaking the silence, "is this just a regular day for you?" Sayeri didn't look up. "If you mean killing a Nyxtra, then no." She cut a strip of the hide free, tossing it onto a pile of usable materials. "If you mean surviving, then yes." Daniel exhaled, rubbing his face. "Hell of a life." Sayeri smirked slightly. "Only the strong live. The weak are forgotten." Daniel frowned. "That a rule your people follow?" Sayeri froze for a second. It was so brief that most wouldn't have noticed. But Daniel did. Something was off. For the past few hours, he had been watching her. Sayeri was a survivor, a warrior, strong, efficient, alone. But why? Every species, every intelligent civilization had some form of community. No one survived alone unless they had to. Daniel sat forward, watching her closely. "You said before that no ships come here," he said. "That no signals leave." Sayeri nodded. Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Then how did you get here?" The question lingered in the air like a slow-moving blade. For a long moment, Sayeri didn't answer. Instead, she continued working on the hide, her movements slower now. Finally, she said, "I was left here." Daniel blinked. "You mean stranded, like me?" She scoffed. "Not like you." Daniel frowned. "Then how?" Sayeri finally stopped working. She set down the blade and met his gaze. Her golden eyes burned like embers. "My people," she said, voice tight, "are called the Karenji. We are a proud race. Strong, unyielding." Daniel listened carefully. Sayeri's jaw clenched. "But we are ruled by cowards." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Cowards." Sayeri exhaled through her nose. "The Karenji believe that honor comes only through obedience, that to question the hierarchy is to betray it." Daniel tilted his head. "And you questioned it?" Sayeri's hands curled into fists. "I did more than question," she said, voice dark. "I defied them." Daniel leaned forward slightly. He could see the anger in her eyes. The pain. "I fought for those who could not fight for themselves," she continued. "For the weak. For those who were cast aside." Daniel watched her carefully. "And they didn't like that." Sayeri's lips curled into something bitter. "No, they called me a traitor, a disgrace. Instead of killing me, they gave me a different punishment." She gestured to the cave around them. "They sent me here to die." Silence filled the cave. Daniel absorbed the information, his mind turning over the details. She had been banished, cast out by her own people, left to survive on a frozen hellscape with no chance of escape. And yet, she had survived. Daniel exhaled. That's why you're alone. Sayeri glanced at him. He nodded toward the Nixtra hide. The armor, the weapons, the way you live. He gestured to the cave. You built all of this with your own hands. You weren't meant to last a week here, were you? Sayeri smirked, though there was no humor in it. No, but they underestimated me. Daniel let out a low whistle. That's cold. Even for an ice planet. Sayeri chuckled softly. Daniel shook his head. But why not leave? If you've survived this long, there must be a way off. Sayeri's smirk vanished. There isn't. Daniel frowned. She stood, walking to the edge of the cave. This planet is a graveyard, human. A place where the forgotten are sent. I have spent years searching for a way out. She turned to him. There is none. Daniel refused to believe that. There has to be, he argued. A ship. A signal. Something. Sayeri shook her head. No signal escapes the storms. No ship has ever landed except to drop prisoners. Daniel clenched his fists. Then we build something. Sayeri gave him a look. With what? Ice and broken metal. Daniel stood, heart pounding. There's always a way. Sayeri studied him for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she laughed. Not mockingly, not cruelly, but almost approvingly. You truly do not know when to give up, do you? Daniel crossed his arms. I'd be dead if I did. Sayeri nodded, a flicker of respect in her eyes. Then her expression grew serious. There is one thing, she said slowly. Daniel's ears perked up. I'm listening. Sayeri hesitated, as if debating whether to tell him. Then she exhaled. To the north, past the great ice chasms, there is said to be a ship, she admitted. An ancient wreck, one that fell long ago. Daniel's pulse quickened. A ship. Sayeri nodded. But it is a legend. No one who has gone searching for it has returned. Daniel exhaled. Sounds promising. Sayeri shook her head. It is dangerous. Daniel grinned. I like dangerous. Sayeri gave him a long, unreadable look. Then, finally, she nodded. Then we leave at first light. Daniel's grin widened. He had a plan. A goal. And for the first time since crashing on this hellish planet, he had hope. The arrival of the hunters. The storm had settled into a slow, whispering wind by the time Daniel and Sayeri left the cave. It was early, but time had little meaning on this planet. The sun, a distant and weak blue star, barely broke through the thick clouds that wrapped the sky in an endless storm. Shadows stretched across the frozen wasteland as Daniel and Sayeri moved through the snow, their forms small against the towering ice mountains in the distance. Daniel's breath came out in white puffs, the cold biting through his gear. Even with Sayeri's fur-lined cloak over his shoulders, the temperature was punishing. And yet, his mind wasn't on the cold. It was on the wreckage of a ship that might not exist. Sayeri had called it a legend, a rumor whispered by those who had been left behind before her. A massive warship, fallen long ago, buried deep in the frozen north. If it was real, it could be their only chance off this world. If it wasn't, they would die chasing a ghost. Daniel glanced at Sayeri, who moved through the ice fields with practiced ease. Her golden eyes flicked over the landscape, scanning for danger. He had learned by now that nothing stayed safe for long. They had only been walking for a few hours when the sky changed. The omen in the sky. At first, Daniel thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The heavy storm clouds overhead seemed to shift. Then, a low rumble rolled through the air. Daniel stopped. Did you hear that? Sayeri had already stopped moving. Her body was tense, her spear in hand. Then he saw it. A shape moved above the clouds. Massive, silent, unnatural. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. It was a ship. Not a wreck, not a legend. A real, moving ship. And it was descending. The air hummed as it broke through the atmosphere, emerging from the storm like a metal beast. Its hull was dark, sleek, covered in glowing red markings that pulsed like veins. Daniel felt a chill, and it wasn't from the cold. Sayeri cursed under her breath. "You recognize it?" Daniel asked, heart pounding. Sayeri's jaw tightened. "Yes." Daniel felt his stomach sink. "That's not a good yes." Sayeri grabbed his arm and pulled him toward cover behind a jagged ice formation. "That is a warship," she said, voice low. "Kurenji. My people." Daniel's pulse spiked. Sayeri's people. The ones who had banished her. And they were here now. The landing of the warriors. The ship slowed, hovering just above the ice. A deep metallic groan echoed across the wasteland as landing gear unfolded from its underbelly. Then, with a loud hiss, a ramp extended. Figures emerged from the ship, stepping into the cold. They moved like predators, tall, armored, and deadly. Their black and silver armor glowed faintly in the dim light, their helmets smooth and featureless except for the piercing red visors that pulsed like fire. Daniel counted at least 10 warriors, all moving in perfect formation. Each carried a curved energy weapon, crackling with lethal energy. At their head stood a figure unlike the rest. He was taller than the others, his armor marked with deep red stripes, a sign of rank. His helmet was off, revealing a strong, chiseled face with cold, sharp features. His skin was a deeper blue than Sayeri's, and his piercing silver eyes scanned the landscape like a hawk. Sayeri whispered his name like a curse. "Vorkar." Daniel glanced at her. "Friend of yours." Sayeri's expression darkened. "Executioner." Daniel's stomach dropped. Vorkar's gaze swept across the landscape before he spoke, his voice amplified by a built-in communicator. "Sayeri, I know you are here." Daniel's breath caught. He knew. He wasn't just here by chance. He was here for her. Daniel turned to Sayeri, whispering, "How do they know where you are?" Sayeri's eyes burned with fury, because they never stopped watching. Daniel felt an uncomfortable chill crawl up his spine. Vorkar took another step forward. "I am here to offer you a choice." Asterisk asterisk. The warriors behind him stood still, waiting. Sayeri's hands clenched into fists. Vorkar's voice was smooth, confident. "The human is a problem. Give him to us, and you will be welcomed back. Refuse." He smiled, sharp and cruel. "And I will finish what your exile could not." Silence. The cold wind howled around them. Daniel's heartbeat pounded in his ears. This was bad. He turned to Sayeri. "So, you're not thinking about taking that deal, right?" Sayeri turned toward him, eyes blazing. "I would rather die in the ice than kneel before him." Daniel nodded slowly. Cool. Just checking." Then he tightened his grip on his plasma cutter, because it looked like they were about to fight. The battle in the snow. The moment Sayeri stepped into view, the warriors tensed. Daniel followed, his mind racing for a plan that didn't involve getting instantly vaporized. Vorkar smiled at Sayeri, like a predator that had already won. "Ah," he said, "I was hoping you would not disappoint me." Sayeri twirled her spear, steady as stone. "If you wanted disappointment, you should have looked in a mirror." Vorkar's smile faded. Then he gave the order. "Kill the human. Bring me Sayeri alive." The battle erupted. Sayeri moved first, faster than lightning. She dodged the first energy blast and lunged, her spear finding a weak spot in one warrior's armor. Daniel, on the other hand, was running for his life. The warriors fired at him, red energy bolts melting the ice around his feet. He dove behind a frozen boulder, panting. "Could really use a gun right now," he muttered. Instead, he grabbed a chunk of broken ship debris from the ground. It wasn't a weapon, but it was sharp. Better than nothing. Sayeri was a whirlwind of destruction. She moved like a dancer, flipping over a soldier, kicking another in the chest, and slicing through armor with precision. Daniel was not as graceful. When a warrior lunged at him, he dodged purely by accident, slipping on the ice and crashing into the soldier's legs. Both hit the ground hard. Daniel stabbed his makeshift weapon into the soldier's visor before he could recover. The helmet cracked, and the warrior slumped. Daniel pushed himself up, gasping. Then he heard the sound he didn't want to hear, a ship engine powering up. He turned, just in time to see Vorkar walking toward Sayeri, his energy blade glowing. Daniel's stomach tightened. This fight wasn't over. It was just getting started. War in the blizzard. The battlefield was chaos. Blaster fire sizzled through the frozen air, lighting up the snow in bursts of red. The wind howled, kicking up ice and dust as Daniel ducked behind a jagged ice ridge, his heart pounding against his ribs. He risked a glance. Sayeri was fighting like a force of nature. Her spear moved like lightning, cutting through Korenji warriors with brutal efficiency. Her cloak whipped in the wind, her golden eyes burning with pure fury. But Vorkar was waiting. He stood at the edge of the fight, calm, watching, his energy blade humming in his hand. He didn't need to rush. His soldiers were doing the work for him. And if Daniel knew anything about men like Vorkar, it was this. He would only step in when he was sure he could win. Daniel gritted his teeth. They weren't going to let that happen. A desperate plan. Daniel turned back to the fight. The Korenji soldiers were closing in. They moved like shadows, coordinated, precise, their armor gleaming with red sigils of war. Too many. Sayeri was strong, fast, deadly. But even she couldn't fight forever. They needed to end this. Now, Daniel's mind raced. The Korenji warship loomed in the distance, its massive form partially obscured by the storm. It had landed, but its engines were still active, pulsing softly with power. That was their way out. Daniel glanced at Sayeri. We need to get to the ship. Sayeri dodged a plasma strike, spinning her spear to gut the attacker in one swift motion. She turned, eyes blazing. There are 10 warriors between us, and that ship, she growled. We will never make it. Daniel grinned. Not if we fight through them, he said. But what if we don't have to? Sayeri frowned. Explain. Daniel motioned to the landscape around them. The ice ridge they were hiding behind wasn't just a ridge. It was a formation of unstable, towering spires, thin and sharp as glass. A perfect avalanche trap. Daniel grabbed a plasma charge from one of the fallen Korenji warriors. If we bring the ice down, he said, we can bury them in the storm and use the chaos to get to the ship. Sayeri's eyes narrowed, flicking to the ridge, then to Daniel. Then, for the first time since they met, she smiled. Now I see why you are still alive, human. Daniel smirked. I'm full of surprises. Triggering the avalanche. Sayeri covered him as Daniel scrambled up the ridge, the plasma charge tight in his grip. The Korenji warriors saw him immediately. Stop him, one of them barked. Plasma bolts whizzed past his head, melting the ice beneath his feet. Daniel stumbled, nearly losing his balance, but he forced himself forward. Sayeri was a blur of motion below, holding off 3 warriors at once. Daniel reached the top, gasping for breath. The ice beneath him was thin, fragile. Perfect. He slammed the charge into the ridge, then armed it. 5 seconds. The Korenji soldiers were already climbing. Daniel jumped. He hit the ground hard, rolling as the charge detonated behind him. The explosion ripped through the ice. A deep rumble echoed through the wasteland. Then, the world collapsed. Massive shards of jagged ice broke free, crashing down like falling daggers. A wall of white erupted, swallowing the battlefield in a violent snowstorm. Daniel barely had time to move before Sayeri grabbed him, pulling him away from the impact zone. The Karenji warriors were caught in the avalanche. Their shouts were lost in the storm, their figures vanishing beneath the ice. But not all of them. The duel with Vorkar. Through the whirling snow, a single figure remained standing. Vorkar. His silver eyes locked onto Ciari, and for the first time, his calm mask cracked. Daniel recognized the look in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment. "You would rather die here than reclaim your honor," Vorkar said, stepping forward, energy blade humming with power. Ciari didn't hesitate. She charged. Vorkar met her head-on, their weapons clashing in a blinding flash of energy. The fight was brutal, fast, relentless. Ciari fought with fluid, deadly strikes, her spear moving in precise arcs. But Vorkar was strong. He fought with calculated brutality, his blade forcing Ciari back inch by inch. Daniel knew what he had to do. As the two warriors clashed, he sprinted toward the warship, dodging falling ice and wreckage. The Karenji had left the ramp open. They had been so confident in their victory. Their mistake. Daniel dashed inside, blaster fire ringing in his ears. Stealing the warship. The ship's interior was cold and metallic, lined with dark control panels covered in alien symbols. Daniel ignored the unfamiliar tech and ran straight for the pilot's console. He had no idea how to fly a Karenji warship, but he was damn sure gonna try. He pressed a random sequence of buttons. The ship shuddered beneath him, engines roaring to life. Outside, Ciari and Vorkar were still locked in combat. Then, Vorkar knocked her weapon away. Ciari stumbled, dropping to one knee. Vorkar raised his blade for the final strike. Daniel didn't think. He yanked the ship's weapons controls, firing a shockwave blast that ripped through the battlefield. The impact threw Vorkar backward, sending him crashing into the snow. Daniel slammed the ship's comms. "Ciari, get inside. Now." Ciari didn't hesitate. She leaped onto the ramp just as Daniel pulled the controls up, lifting the warship into the air. The blizzard swallowed Vorkar's figure below, his silver eyes watching them rise. Then he was gone. Escape into the unknown. The ship shot upward, breaking free of the storm. Daniel let out a breath of disbelief. They had done it. Ciari dropped into the co-pilot's seat, panting, covered in battle wounds and ice, but her eyes were alight with victory. Daniel turned to her. "So," he said, "you want to tell me how to actually fly this thing?" Ciari let out a genuine laugh. "Move," she said, shoving him aside and grabbing the controls. The ship angled toward the stars, leaving the frozen planet behind. Daniel leaned back, exhausted. They had escaped. But he had a feeling. This fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. A new path forward. The warship tore through the storm, rising above the thick, swirling clouds into the vastness of space. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Daniel saw stars. Bright, distant, endless. He had made it off that frozen hell. Ciari sat in the pilot's seat, her hands moving across the Karenji control panels with practiced ease. The ship's thrusters hummed beneath them, responding to her touch like a beast obeying its master. Daniel, still catching his breath, slumped into the co-pilot's chair. His arms were sore. His ribs ached. His suit was torn and stained from battle. But he was alive. They both were. A dangerous pursuit. Daniel exhaled, staring at the holographic display in front of him. A swirling red warning symbol flashed repeatedly. Tell me that's not what I think it is," he muttered. Ciari didn't look at him. Her golden eyes remained fixed on the redouts. "It is exactly what you think it is," she said. Daniel groaned. Fantastic. The Karenji warship was tracking them. Vorkar wasn't dead. He had survived. And if Daniel knew anything about men like him, they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. A proximity alarm blared, and the ship's sensors flashed. Daniel's stomach dropped. Multiple smaller Karenji fighters had launched from the main warship, closing in fast. Okay, Daniel said, gripping the seat's armrests. Do we have weapons? Sayeri's fingers danced over the console. Yes. Shields. Yes. A plan. Sayeri finally smirked. No. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Great. Love that for us. The enemy fighters swooped into formation, their engines burning red against the darkness. Sayeri didn't hesitate. She jerked the controls, sending their stolen ship into a sharp, stomach-lurching dive. Plasma fire sizzled past the cockpit, missing them by inches. Daniel gritted his teeth. Tell me you know how to fly this thing. Sayeri laughed. I learned from the best. Daniel blinked. Wait, really? No. She yanked the controls again, twisting the ship sideways to avoid another barrage. Daniel grabbed the weapons panel. All right. If we're gonna die, we might as well take a few of them with us. He activated the turrets, locking onto the nearest pursuer. A satisfying beep confirmed a target lock. Daniel fired. A bright streak of plasma tore through space, hitting the enemy fighter dead center. The ship erupted in a ball of flame. Daniel let out a whoop. One down. Sayeri smirked, gripping the controls tighter. Then do not stop. The next few minutes were pure chaos. Daniel and Sayeri zigzagged through space, dodging incoming fire, returning shots whenever they could. The stolen ship wasn't built for speed, but Sayeri flew like a demon, twisting, diving, skimming along asteroid fields to shake off their pursuers. 2 more enemy fighters exploded under Daniel's fire, but they were outnumbered. More ships were coming. The main warship loomed in the distance, its massive shape blotting out the stars. If they didn't escape now, they never would. A risky escape. Daniel turned to Sayeri. Tell me there's a hyperdrive. Sayeri's expression hardened. There is. Daniel blinked. Wait, seriously? Yes. Daniel threw up his hands. Why the hell didn't we use it already? Sayeri scowled. Because the ship is still locked to Korenji command. Daniel groaned. Of course it is. Because nothing is ever easy. Sayeri pulled up a holographic interface, tapping through the ship's security system. If I can override it, we may have a chance. Daniel clenched his fists. How long? Sayeri glanced at him. Too long. Daniel exhaled sharply, scanning the control panel. His eyes landed on something. A blinking red button. Daniel's gut twisted. What's that? He asked, pointing. Sayeri followed his gaze. Her expression darkened. Emergency energy core detonation. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. Like a self-destruct. Sayeri nodded slowly. It will destroy the ship, but also everything within range. Daniel felt the weight of that decision settle in his chest. They had 2 choices. Try to escape using the stolen ship, hoping Sayeri could hack the hyperdrive before they got blown out of the sky. Set the ship to explode and use the escape pod, betting that the explosion would take out the enemy fighters and mask their escape. Neither option was good. Sayeri looked at Daniel. You are human. You choose. Daniel clenched his fists. Then he made the call. The final gamble. Daniel reached for the red button. Sayeri raised an eyebrow. You are certain? Daniel nodded. We're not winning a dogfight against that fleet, but we might be able to vanish in the blast. Sayeri grinned. You are braver than I thought, human. Daniel smirked. Or dumber. Sayeri activated the self-destruct sequence. A countdown flashed across the display. 60 seconds. They sprinted toward the escape pod, slamming into the tiny cockpit. The pod sealed shut, ejecting from the ship like a bullet. Through the viewport, Daniel watched as the stolen warship drifted toward the enemy fleet. Then, boom! The ship erupted in a blinding explosion, ripping through space with a force that sent shockwaves across the battlefield. The enemy fighters were engulfed in the blast, disappearing in a storm of fire. The escape pod spun wildly through space, caught in the shockwave. Daniel gritted his teeth, gripping the seat as they tumbled through the void. Then, suddenly, silence. The stars settled. The enemy fleet was gone. And they were alive. A new beginning. Sayari exhaled. We live. Daniel let out a breathless laugh. Yeah, we do. They sat in the silence of space, watching the distant stars. Then, Sayari turned to him, her golden eyes thoughtful. You had a chance to leave me behind, she said. But you did not. Daniel shrugged. You saved my ass more times than I can count. Seems fair. Sayari smirked. A rare trait among your kind. Daniel arched an eyebrow. You haven't met many humans, have you? Sayari chuckled. No, but I think I would like to. Daniel looked ahead at the endless stretch of space. Their escape pod's navigation screen flickered to life, picking up a distant, unfamiliar signal. A new path, a new chance, a new future. Daniel leaned back, crossing his arms. So, he said, smirking, where to next? Sayari grinned. Anywhere but here. The pod drifted into the stars, toward whatever adventure came next.